They told you that sacrifice is love, that the more you give, the more you'll be valued, that a real man provides without question, without limit, without end. They told you that working longer hours, carrying heavier burdens, and erasing yourself for others would earn respect, gratitude, and devotion. They lied. What no one told you is that sacrifice, when given blindly, does not create admiration. It creates expectation. The provider trap is the oldest con in human psychology. Convince a man that his worth is measured by how much he gives, and then strip him of respect the moment he believes it. Picture this: a man breaking his back at work, missing dinners, missing milestones, missing his own life. He buys gifts, pays bills, funds vacations, and thinks he's buying loyalty. But every dollar spent is like pouring water into a bucket with no bottom. No matter how much he gives, it is never enough. And worse, every gift lowers his value in her eyes, not raises it. Because in the brutal economy of desire, provision without boundaries does not inspire attraction. It suffocates it. A man who sacrifices endlessly becomes invisible. He is no longer a partner, he is a utility. No longer a leader, he is a resource. No longer a man. He is an ATM with legs. The tragedy is that men step into this trap willingly, believing it is proof of love. They think, if I give more, she will love me more. If I sacrifice harder, she will see my worth. But psychology tells a darker truth. The more you erase yourself in service, the less you are respected. And when respect dies, desire follows. Imagine a scale. On one side, provision. On the other, attraction. At first, the more you give, the more balanced it feels, but keep stacking sacrifice, and the scale tips the wrong way. She does not lean closer. She leans away. She does not feel safer. She feels smothered. She does not admire the man who kills himself to provide. She pities him, and pity is the coffin of desire. This is the provider trap, the belief that self-erasure buys love, the false promise that sacrifice equals loyalty, the illusion that responsibility will keep her warm at night. But the truth is merciless. Sacrifice without sovereignty breeds contempt, not connection. And here's the darkest twist. The very traits that men are told will make them desirable, dependability, provision, selflessness, become the same traits that turn them invisible. Because love does not die when you stop providing. It dies when your entire identity becomes provision. This is the opening cut, the wound most men never see until it's too late. They wake up one day, exhausted from years of sacrifice, only to realize they are not admired, not desired, not respected, but tolerated. And tolerance is the quiet funeral of masculinity. So listen carefully, because in this episode, we are going to rip the mask off the provider script. We are going to expose the hidden mechanics that turn sacrifice into slavery and devotion into leverage. And once you see the trap, you will never step into it again. To understand the provider trap, you have to step into psychology, anthropology, and even evolutionary history. Because this isn't just about money or gifts. It's about how the human brain interprets value, respect, and attraction. In ancient times, survival depended on provision. A man who hunted, who built, who defended, ensured not only his life, but the life of his tribe. Provision equaled survival. This is why male identity became deeply tied to giving, protecting, and providing. It wasn't manipulation back then. It was necessity. A man who failed to provide doomed his lineage. But here's the brutal shift. In the modern world, provision no longer equals survival. Women can earn, protect, and provide for themselves. Survival is no longer scarce. What is scarce now is status, authority, and psychological gravity. And when a man continues to act as if survival provision equals desire, he sets himself up for collapse. He confuses responsibility with attraction, duty with desire. Psychology reveals a paradox. Gratitude and attraction are not the same thing. Gratitude says, "Thank you for helping me." Attraction says, "I cannot resist you." The provider script makes men chase gratitude, believing it will convert into attraction. But gratitude alone never sustains desire. It breeds comfort, safety, even pity, but rarely passion. And when a man becomes associated only with duty, the nervous system stops coding him as a source of excitement and starts coding him as a utility. Social psychology sharpens the knife. People unconsciously value what is scarce, costly, and hard to access. When a man gives endlessly, time, money, energy, he signals that his attention is cheap, that his resources flow without restraint. Instead of inspiring respect, it creates habituation. Just like the brain stops noticing constant background noise, it stops noticing constant sacrifice. What was once extraordinary becomes invisible. Now add another layer. Female psychology of testing. Women don't consciously design it this way, but subconsciously they are wired to probe for strength, resilience, and leadership. When a man gives without boundaries, without resistance, without standards, he signals that he can be controlled, that his frame collapses under pressure. What begins as appreciation quickly mutates into contempt. She does not say it aloud, but her nervous system whispers, "If he erases himself this easily, can I really trust him to lead, to protect, to stand firm?" Evolutionary psychology explains why this happens. In ancestral settings, a man who gave everything away without discipline risked starvation, danger, or weakness for the entire tribe. Women were wired to distrust reckless sacrifice because it meant instability. That instinct remains today. A man who sacrifices endlessly in the modern world doesn't look noble. He looks unstable. Finally, neuroscience reveals the death blow. The human brain equates predictability with boredom. If every gesture, every gift, every sacrifice is predictable, the dopamine system flatlines. What once brought excitement now brings indifference. This is why the provider trap is so lethal. It convinces men that more giving will revive attraction, when in fact every additional sacrifice only deepens the void. So here is the cruel reality. The provider script is not just outdated, it is inverted. What once ensured survival now ensures collapse. What once built tribes now destroys intimacy. Because love today is not bought with duty, respect is not bought with sacrifice, desire is not bought with provision, they are all bought with sovereignty. 1. The gratitude-desire disconnect, the utility mechanism. This is the first poison in the provider trap. Men confuse gratitude with desire. They believe that the more they provide, the more she will want them. But gratitude and desire live in different systems of the brain. Gratitude activates security and comfort. Desire is activated by tension and polarity. When you become her provider, she may say thank you, but her body says, "I don't crave you." You stop being the storm and become the furniture, useful but invisible. 2. The sacrifice spiral, the erosion mechanism. Provision easily slides into sacrifice, and sacrifice without recognition kills self-respect. The provider believes, if I give more, she will see my worth. But in reality, the more he sacrifices, the more invisible he becomes. Each cancelled plan, each ignored boundary, each night of overwork to keep her happy erodes not only his attraction in her eyes, but also his identity in his own. The spiral deepens until the man no longer knows who he is without her approval. 3. The predictability collapse, the boredom mechanism. The third mechanism is the most silent killer, predictability. When provision is constant and unbroken, it loses all value. Just like an unlimited supply of anything, attention, money, food, it stops being noticed. This is why many women lose attraction not in hardship, but in stability. They are not wired to feel desire for a man who feels like background noise. Predictability flattens polarity, and polarity is the oxygen of desire. 4. The resentment reversal, the contempt mechanism. Here lies the cruel twist. The more he gives, the more she resents him. Not because she is cruel, but because her nervous system codes endless provision as weakness. Each unreciprocated gift, each sacrifice without boundaries whispers, "He needs my validation more than I need his presence." What began as appreciation mutates into contempt. She begins to test him more harshly, withdraw more suddenly, and admire him less. His provider role becomes not noble, but pitiful. 5. The identity eclipse, the self-erasure mechanism. The final and deadliest trap is self-erasure. The man who lives only as provider eventually forgets that he is more than a wallet, more than a sacrifice machine. His mission, his friendships, his passions, his masculine edge, all fade behind the shadow of service. And once identity collapses, sovereignty vanishes. He no longer lives for himself, he lives to avoid abandonment. And nothing kills attraction faster than a man who abandons himself. 1. Recode gratitude versus desire, restoring polarity. The first rule is simple: never confuse gratitude with desire. To break this mechanism, you must recode your actions. Providing is useful, but it does not create attraction. Attraction comes from polarity, tension, and mystery. Practical strategy. Before giving something, ask yourself, does this reinforce my utility or my presence? Replace predictable gifts with gestures of intensity, not flowers bought out of habit, but deliberate silence followed by strong presence. What is measured is not what you give, but the impact of your presence. 2. Break the sacrifice spiral. The rule of fair exchange. Constant sacrifice is self-erasure. To break the cycle, establish the rule of fair exchange. Never pour energy into someone without seeing an equivalent return. This doesn't mean demanding something in return, but noticing whether there is reciprocity. Practice. For every big effort you make, observe if it is met with respect, effort, or appreciation. If not, stop investing in that channel. Discipline means cutting off the leaks of energy. This doesn't make you less generous, it makes you more dignified. 3. Reintroduce the unpredictable, reviving mystery. The antidote to predictability is variation. The man who always reacts the same way becomes invisible. The man who surprises reignites desire. Practical strategy. Break the script. If she expects a daily text, change the rhythm. If she expects obedience, show autonomy. If she expects routine, inject novelty. This isn't manipulation, it's balance. Living relationships require contrast, warmth and silence, routine and disruption, stability and challenge. 4. Neutralize the poison of resentment. Rebuild status with boundaries. Respect is never begged for. It is commanded silently through boundaries. When you see that your generosity is breeding contempt, do not increase it. Reduce it. Speak less, give less, but hold firm to your standards. Practical strategy. Apply the calm boundary rule. If the conversation slips into ridicule, walk away. If demands outweigh reciprocity, freeze your attention. Respect never returns to the man who begs. It returns to the man who shows he can withdraw without fear. 5. Reverse the eclipse of identity. Reconnect with mission. The final cure to the provider trap is returning to being the protagonist of your own life. A man who lives only to provide disappears. A man who lives his mission attracts. Practical strategy. Build pillars of sovereignty. Body, physical training, mind, continuous learning, and mission, goals and projects outside the relationship. When you shine in your own orbit, you stop being a supplier and become a source. The provider buys acceptance. The man of mission commands respect. They told you that being a provider was enough, that sacrifice would buy love, that constant giving would secure loyalty, that devotion would guarantee desire. But the brutal truth is this: provision without polarity breeds contempt. Sacrifice without standards breeds invisibility. Love without respect becomes theater. The provider script is not just a role, it is a trap. It trains men to measure their worth by what they give, instead of who they are. And when you live only to provide, you erase the very thing that once created attraction: your presence, your gravity, your mission. Here is the closing clarity. You were not born to be a wallet, a workhorse, or an endless fountain of effort. You were born to be a center of gravity, a man whose presence speaks louder than gifts, whose silence carries more weight than explanations, whose boundaries command more respect than any sacrifice ever could. So here is your challenge. Stop begging for validation through provision. Stop buying respect with favors. Stop mistaking loyalty for desire. Reclaim your mission. Rebuild your standards. Anchor yourself so deeply in who you are that no amount of giving can erase your identity. Because in the end, survival in relationships is not about how much you provide. It is about how much you refuse to be erased. The man who escapes the provider trap does not chase love. He commands it. He does not trade effort for crumbs of respect. He radiates respect by existing in his full sovereignty. And if this episode opened your eyes, know this: we've only scratched the surface of the hidden code. The provider trap is just one layer. Beneath it lies the architecture of contempt, the validation economy, the weapon of silence, and the dark psychology of intermittent reinforcement. If you want to master the full code, if you want to stop being programmed by invisible patterns and start writing your own, then stay here, subscribe, turn on notifications, and prepare for the next chapter, where we go even deeper into the mechanics of power, respect, and survival. Because survival is not luck, it is awareness. And awareness begins now.